Hello and welcome. You're viewing the Citizens Journalist podcast, Mesa County Compass, that brings you the news that you can use from a different point of view. I'm Ruth.
I'm Lisa.
And together we are Mesa County Compass. Our goal is to create an informed, current, active citizenry armed with the facts. We will be covering what's new to you, what it means to you, what you can do about it, and provide you access to the decision makers when we can. Welcome to Mesa County Compass. This afternoon we are interviewing Cody Davis, who is one of our county commissioners, who is also, his job is up for grabs this time. He's running again, and he does have an opponent. So we just want to get some information about you, Cody. Would
Absolutely.
you tell us a little bit about yourself and why you wanted to become a county commissioner?
Absolutely. So I'm a home builder, developer locally. Been doing that probably since about 2008. Actually built my first home when I was straight out of high school. My dad threw me on a job site and said, you're going to learn it and learn it the hard way. So that was back in 2004. I built my first home. But then I went to school in Missouri, got a degree there. That's where I met my wife, Alana. And then we moved back in about 2008, into 2008, early 2009. Started building a family. And then that's when I started my business, building houses in the valley. I actually came back and wanted to join my dad's business. And he said, I don't want to do business with families, so do your own thing. And so I started building houses and competing with him. And I'd like to say that I put him out of business, but he retired.
Well, kind of. You aged him out.
Right. No, he retired in 2013, 14, and we were able to take advantage of some of the, the property that he still had that wasn't developed. So,
nice.
But my great grandparents moved out here in the late 1800s, and they were tenant farmers, and so they never bought any land, but they just moved from farm to farm and farmed the area, and then that was in late 1800s, and then we've been here ever since. So my kids are sixth generation natives, and I love the area. I can't see myself going anywhere ever. I love this place. This is true Colorado, Western Colorado, still rural, with the benefit of having kind of a dense area here in Grand Junction. What got me into politics to begin with was being in the development world and trying to get projects approved and build houses. And you always get before a government body, and you think, I've got this proposed right to build, develop. They say I can do this, this, and that at this density, and I present that to them, and it would still get turned down. And I'm thinking, this is so unpredictable. How can we make the process more predictable? How people have to stick to their guns. You either don't have a land use policy, you either don't have a land development code, or you don't, and you got to stick to it. But sometimes people would cave when you had a few people that showed up and said they don't want the project, even though it was a right that I kind of have. It still has to go before the city council to get approved, or the county commissioners. And that's really what got me thinking about politics. Was there's got to be a better way. We need more people who are principled, who can kind of stand in the heat and make the right decision, the principled decision, and articulate that decision. And so then in 2018, 19 is when I really started thinking about it. And we had gotten the business. Me and my brothers were business partners, and we really got. I really got thinking about doing it. And I said, hey, we've got the wheels kind of greased on this business. It's running really well. Why don't you kind of step into more of a CEO position, and I'll step out and run for office. And he was like, yep, I'm all in for it. So that's when I ran for office in 2020, and
the rest is history.
The rest is history, I guess. So and then I'm running again this year. I've got no primary opponent, which is it feels good, right? Because it's hard when you get an opponent. I mean, you got to spend a lot of money and raise a lot of money and do a lot of work in the primary, and I would have done it, but it's always nice to kind of skip the primary and go into a general. And so save the money for the general election. I do have a Democrat opponent. His name is Tom Acker. He's a CMU professor, and looking forward to getting to the general and making the case to the people again that to give me 4 more years.
And what do you think is the difference in how he would see his role as county commissioner versus how you see your role as county commissioner?
Yeah, so the way I see it is government has to fulfill a proper role. And it's hard when you get into government because you have a lot of money at your disposal. You can do some really neat things, some cool things, but if you don't define what the role of government is, it's really easy to get out in the weeds and start doing things you shouldn't be involved in. And so I guess to define what the core function of government is, and I think it's grown over the years. When government was first instituted, it was the scope was very narrow, and it's grown a bunch, but we try to hem in that scope and stick to it. I mean, core public infrastructure is kind of that basic role of government. Roads, bridges. We now do by state mandate. We do. We have health directives, human service directives. But one of the things we also run is the landfill. Like, people couldn't run a business if they didn't have a place legally to dispose of their trash. So,
True.
So that's kind of that core infrastructure that business and people need to live their daily lives and have that freedom and opportunity. So, hemming it in, making sure we're operating in the core, because we could do a lot of good things. Our budget is close to $260 million. You could do a lot of you could do a lot of stuff with that much money, and but you got to focus on what the core role of government is. And I think that's probably the primary difference. I think Mr. Acker probably has some ambitions to what he can do with our taxpayer dollars, but we need to keep it limited. You've seen property taxes, what they've done in the last couple of years.
Yeah. And people squeal.
They are through the roof. And people are already struggling to pay for groceries and services to their vehicles. And you name it. Those inflation is killing their budget. And so to even have a small increase, a couple $100, is hurting them. But most values went up 40% in Mesa County, including businesses and residences. And if they'd have taken that entire hit, that would have been tough. But there was a special session last year that reduced the rates, made a value adjustment to people's houses, which took a lot of that increase off.
Helped.
They just passed a bill, I believe it was yesterday, was the last day of the session. They kind of kicked that can down a little bit farther, put a hard cap. I was surprised they actually got to a hard cap. I was on the I was appointed by the governor to the Property Tax Commission, and we worked hard to try to get people at the table and say, we need a hard cap. Because they were talking about soft caps, it adjusts. But when you get too soft a cap, it's really no cap at all.
Right.
It's just this perception that there's this cap, but it'd be hard to hit the cap. So we needed a hard percentage cap. And it started out at 6 and went down to 5 3/4, and I believe it ended up at 5.5%. It reduced the rates for residential and commercial substantially, actually. The only thing I don't like about it is that it decoupled the school district. So half of your property tax bill will be capped, but half of it won't, because half of our bill, more than half of our bill, goes to the school district. Because
Right.
the state actually backfills school districts for what they because they have to get to a certain per pupil price, and whatever they don't generate in property taxes, the state backfills. So they didn't want to cap property taxes, because that means the state would have to backfill more. So that minimizes the impact of the property tax bill, which I wasn't in support. I was in support of the bill as a grand compromise, but people got to understand there's going to be a couple initiatives on the ballot that voters will be actually able to take that cap even further. I think it's Prop 50. If it's already on the ballot, and if it's a constitutional amendment that will put a hard cap of 4% on everything, property taxes, on everything property taxes.
That's interesting. I hadn't heard that one, so that's going to be that's going to be a real fighting point.
It will, and there will be another one, and I can't remember the number, but it will reduce rates as well. So the legislature did their best. It was actually a bipartisan bill. Both Republicans and Democrats voted on it, and that reduced it this year. But the voters will answer this fall, did it go far enough?
Right.
So,
And it didn't.
It never does.
Well, when we had Brett and Janet on, one of the things that we noticed and appreciated was that the county decided that it would reduce the mill levies that they were doing. But what Brett said is you have all of these special districts that may or may not reduce theirs. And I don't know that anybody else said, when we've got a 40% increase in the valuation, we don't need as much mill levy to meet what we were, because it's a hardship on people. And I think the county, and I could be wrong, was the only one that said we'll take less.
We did, and I would like to take credit for that, but I got to get credit due, and it's Tabor, because the county is still Tabor limited. So it forces the county mill levy down. Which that is the beauty of Tabor, and that's why I've always supported Tabor, because it has that natural cap on it. And the county has been, in the last several years, have been bumping. Sometimes it's only $500,000, but a couple years ago it was close to $13 million, and that's why people got checks back for $122 a piece, because we hit our cap. We will hit our cap again this year, and so that's the beauty of Tabor. But we are the only Tabor revenue limited taxing district in all of Mesa County. Every other taxing district has debruced. The city of Grand Junction, Palisade, Fruita, they've all debruced, so they kind of grow at will. And that caps both our property and our sales tax. A few years ago, under the last commission, there was a ballot initiative put on that exempted like grant revenue. So like when we get a grant to build a new building, well, it was pointless to accept grants because they just hit your table revenue. So that exempted us because that's essentially tax dollars that the community has already paid to the federal government. And so we felt like we should be able to collect it, because if we don't collect it, somebody else is collecting it.
Right.
That's right.
So we wanted to exempt that so we could, build justice centers and grow landfills, things like that, and not have that hurt our cap. So.
Okay, sounds good. And we had on a young lady the other day, Amy Tucker, about the Dolores project, and absolutely against it. And we understand that the county commissioners are also against it. Could you explain what you think are the problems?
Yeah, so 13,000 feet. The Dolores area in general has a multitude of protections already. So this idea that is pushed by the proponents that it is, one of the most diverse, unprotected areas in the West is completely false. And they'll tell you, well, we know it's got protections. Well, and my response is, well, why are you guys advertising? They take out full page ads in the paper that says completely unprotected, and that is not true. So yeah, if I'm the uninformed voter or constituent and I just see that and I go, oh, it's unprotected, we better protect it, because believe it or not, we just finished our own poll that took a scientific poll of Mesa County, Montrose, and San Miguel, and it's a scientific poll, so it takes the demographics into account, and it has I think a 2.5% margin of error, but 70+% of people want protection. So either Republican or Democrat, most people like some form of protection of public lands. I think that's just rational. We don't want people going out there with bulldozers and knocking down trees. So most people are like, yes, let's protect our public lands. And so when most people see that, they go, oh yes, we need protection. So if it's unprotected, let's protect it. And it's as though monument status, and which again is just a declaration by the president. It only takes Biden's signature. That's it. If it doesn't go through a public engagement process, it doesn't go through a legislative process, it's just a signature from Biden based on the Antiquities Act in the 1950s to declare something a national monument. And we think that's the wrong way. And in fact, in that same survey, we said, okay, 70% of you plus are in support of some type of protection. So what's the right type of protection? And over 70% said something other than a national monument, because a national monument is not the right way. It's too cumbersome. There's not a public engagement process. And so we feel like we have a directive from the community, Democrats and Republicans alike, to find the right medicine, if you will, for this area. Yes, there may be some places that need a little bit more protection. Let's go ahead and as a community, let's get those things protected. There's a lot of options. The BLM, the National Forest, they have a lot of tools in their toolbox to protect these areas.
They do indeed.
And that's the way we need to go about it. So next Tuesday, we're actually, we've been drafting a resolution, and we didn't want to knee-jerk, because there's too many knee-jerk reactions out there. No, and all this stuff. So we wanted to go through a public process and say, what does our community think? Let's not just, Cody, what do you think? Because I have my own opinions. I really wanted to be a representative of the people. We did, I should say, our commission did, and find out what they thought. And it is loud and clear. They do not want a national monument. And we have scientific proof that proves that here in this community.
Well, and the thing about it is, once you give it monument status, there's no going back.
And, that's even up in the air, too, because Bears Ears in Utah, President Obama declared, and it's a very large area, and then President Obama rescinded Bears Ears.
I didn't know he rescinded it. I'm sorry. I
did
did not know that.
Yeah.
Wow.
And then President Biden put it back, but he didn't put it back to the degree that it was first established by President Obama. And now that area where it used to be and it's not now is actually under active litigation and possibly going to the Supreme Court, because that's the question. Can a president rescind an executive order from a former president? And in other areas we can, but under the Antiquities Act can. And that question has never been answered by the Supreme Court. So it will be interesting to see that. But yes, what could happen is Biden could declare it this fall, Trump wins, and then Trump pulls it back. And that's not good for anybody.
No.
The legislature can declare a national monument. And if we're going to have a national monument, it's the legislature that needs to declare this. And the whole point behind the Antiquities Act passed in the 1950s was to say, if we have some significant item, let's say Independence Monument, that is of such cultural importance that we need to protect it, it gave the president the ability to go, we need to protect this. It wasn't supposed to be this massive land grab. And that's what it's turned into.
That's what it's turned into.
It should have been like, we need to protect this 100 acres because it has some very culturally sensitive stuff, but now it's turned into 500,000 acre land grabs, and that was not the point of the Antiquities Act or the presidential executive power there. So we think there's a better way. We know there's a better way, and our community agrees with us. So that's where we're heading.
And when you talk about a land grab, what do they want to do with the land, the federal government?
That's kind of the question. It's like, we don't know. We don't get to see the proposals that these environmental groups give to the President of the United States. They'll tell you, well, we're not gonna affect any existing rights. Yeah, but existing rights have leases, and the leases expire. So when those leases expire, are they going to be renewed? Do existing mining claims are they valid in the future? And we know, and they're not too coy about it, but we know their ultimate goal is to get rid of all mining, and which is to me is sad, because we're not living in the 1800s where they just used to take bulldozers and they would destroy landscapes to try to mine the earth. This is the 21st century. We can both extract minerals from the earth and conserve the land.
And we can also put back, when we're done,
correct.
we can restore it again, and we do.
And they require it.
Yeah.
It's not like it's not a requirement. If I strip
it's not
mine
like-
or whatever, I have to.
Like it used to be when you mined and you left these huge mounds of slag and everything
And you scarred
else.
the earth, and it never goes back. And
Right.
again, this is 21st century. We can do it. And beyond that, it comes back down to national security, right? We have minerals in the ground that if we're not extracting those, in Colorado, it's one of the cleanest states to extract oil and natural gas because of all the rules and regulations. We have uranium down there. We even have some, the U.S. Forest Service has some overlays in helium, which is an important reserve. And so if we're not getting it from the United States, we're getting it from countries like Russia who don't care about the environment.
Right.
And if we really care about the environment, we should be the largest producers in the world and exporting it to other countries. We've got it backwards. We want to put our heads in the sand and act like that if we stop producing it, it's gonna clean up the world. I mean, it's kind of like having a pink section in a pool, right?
Right.
We should be cleaning. We should be producing the cleanest oil and natural gas, uranium, you name it, minerals from the earth, and selling it to the rest of the world. It's national security, and you know what? It also helps the environment when we do it in a clean way. 'Cause
Right.
we're not doing it.
Right.
India,
We need to
China,
set
Russia.
those examples.
Right.
Right.
So
Right. So, what about the water? Because that's always another concern.
Sure.
What happens to the water rights, and what are they interested in that for?
that's another big question, and it should concern everybody downstream, what they want from that water, and because they didn't just go through. Because if you look down at the southern Dolores, they have a proposed NCA, National Conservation Area, and it's limited to basically the steep canyons and the river to protect that. And then you get up to the northern Dolores, and it balloons out to the entire watershed. And it looks like a balloon on a string. It really does. And the question is, well, why the narrow protection down here of the steep canyons and those cultural icons, and then you just go up and do the entire watershed? There's no rationale behind it, and other than we want to protect all the water. And there's a serious concern about water rights downstream, because all of this water actually gets dumped into Lake Powell. And Lake Powell is kind of western Colorado. It's actually Colorado's and Utah. It's our piggy bank in the 1922 compact, Colorado River Compact. We have to deliver 7.5 million acre feet to the southern compact, which is California, Nevada, Arizona. And if we don't, we are in violation of that compact. And California technically has senior water rights, so they can make calls on a lot of our rights in the western slope. And so it is very important that we continue to do that. And if we didn't have Lake Powell, we wouldn't be able to do that every year. It assumes there's actually 15 million acre feet that comes down the Colorado River, and there's not actually. So we're actually, even in good years, we barely make 15 million acre feet. So Lake Powell is vitally important to us. So then in the low years, we can still put 7.5 million acre feet down. But Lake Powell getting empty, so water is very important on the western slope. And when you can't even see the plan that they're putting forth, you have no idea how it's going to impact us. Right. And we need to see it. That's why it needs to be a public process. There needs to be stakeholder engagement. We need engagement from our grazers, from our recreation industry. We need it from farmers, agriculturists, miners. We need it from everybody, because we're going to miss something. And so when it's just an environmental group, activists, who takes something to the president and you don't even get to review it until it's signed, that's a problem. That's a huge red flag and a problem.
And Amy said they were in Nucla were not even aware of it until 3 months ago.
Yeah.
That was the plan, and they've been working on it for 2 years.
Oh, they've been working on it for a long time, and they have their own little boxes they got to check, right? So they approached, we found out about it, I can't remember which month it was either January or December, where they approached us about it and said, here's our proposal, and we asked a lot of questions. That's the first we heard of it, and I keep asking them, where's the table, as in like, where's the discussion that's going to happen about what's best for this community, what's best for that area? Who are you to determine that this is what's best for the area? And why aren't we going through this process legislatively? In the Southern Dolores, they're doing NCA, which goes through the legislation. Senator Hickenlooper and Bennett proposed it, and Lauren Boebert proposed a companion bill. They worked together to get the NCA done where it was important, where it's needed. And that's being done. So why can't we do that in the Northern? Or something similar? Or at least have a public engagement process where we say, what do we need to actually protect and fix? And I've always said that government's really bad about feeling like they have to have a solution for everything. And I like to say that sometimes no solution is better than a bad solution. But government just doesn't think like that. And we need to start thinking like that sometimes we do more harm when we try to fix it. Because there is no perfect solution, there's only trade-offs. And in our limited capacity, we can't possibly understand all the trade-offs. That's why it needs to be a public process.
Well, and what can Washington understand about the Dolores Canyon, which I'm sure Biden has never visited, has no idea, where it is, what it is.
He'll look at it for about 7 seconds while he signs it, and then it'll pass over. You know?
Yeah.
So it'll vastly impact everybody down here with a stroke of a pen.
Well, so many jobs lost,
my bailiwick is the Indian reservation and how much it's going to affect the Southern Ute Indian tribe. It's going to be huge.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's like, how is it going to impact? We don't know, and they're not even engaged in the conversation.
Right.
We need to include everybody in that conversation. And my biggest fear, honestly, is what's it going to bring? Like, the last thing I want to see is the Dolores area or this area become another Moab, because we just created another national monument where people can come and boat and recreate, but you can only recreate in certain areas, and I don't think that's what we want here. We have a very productive way of life here in the Western Slope, where we put the land to productive use. Even if it's BLM, we have grazers who are putting this productive use. We don't want to lose that. We have extractors who go on to BLM, National Forests, and they put people to work here in Grand Junction, in this area. And we don't want to lose that. And we want to make sure we understand the impacts. We don't want to put our heads in the sand and just say we have to have a national monument because it's unprotected.
So do you feel like you're kind of have your hands behind your back and there's not a whole lot you can do? Or do you think that engaging the public and letting them know what's going on will make a difference?
Yeah, sometimes it does feel like I'm yelling at the wall. But I do think we're having an impact too. Governor Hickenlooper, he used to be the governor.
Right.
Senator Hickenlooper was here a couple weeks ago and had a public process. I wasn't able to be there, unfortunately, but I think he's really interested in the other view. The first 20 or so, I guess, people who got up to speak were all proponents, bussed in, didn't even live in the area. So this is a very inorganic movement. It's a national movement that they're trying to make look local, and it's not local. And they'll make the argument, well, this is America's land, so America should have to say it. But I think primary are the locals who are going to be impacted. And this area has already been impacted greatly from the elimination of coal, right?
Right.
We have so many coal-impacted communities, especially down in the West End, down in that area. They've been told to deal with it, even though it was their complete livelihoods. And now they're getting this shoved down their throats now as well. They're being told, deal with it, because this is what needs to happen. And I think rural Colorado is tired of Denver and Washington to tell them to deal with it. And
you're exactly right.
I'm hoping Senator Hickenlooper and Senator Bennett are both starting to see that. And even the city of Grand Junction, who doesn't have any constituents down there, kind of telling the area to deal with it, They listened to one side of it, and they never heard the other side of it. And I really wish they would open that back up and listen to the opponents and the proponents of a national monument. Listen to all the options before they support it.
True.
Definitely agree to that. Now then, does take a little subject a little bit further. We were talking about coal and gas and all of that. What about the proposal of nuclear?
Yeah, so it's actually an all energy type survey. It has nuclear in it, but so I'm a chair of the Associated Governments of Northwestern Colorado, long for AGNC, and again, we have a lot of coal impacted communities up in Craig and both Hayden, which is in the AGNC region. We have 2 coal plants that are going to be shut down within the next 5 years,
Yes.
and we're hearing rumors that it's probably going to happen even sooner. And so, what do we do with all of these resources? We have these big generators. We have all these big buildings. We have the apparatus to develop energy. We have all these transmission lines that go to a central location. We have all these workers, engineers, and are we really just going to let these towns die? And there are a lot of options. They could become natural gas plants, which again is supposedly the transition. I don't think it's transition. I think it's a great viable energy. It's cheap, it's reliable, and it doesn't have to be daytime like solar does.
Right.
And the wind doesn't have to be blowing.
Right.
It's on all the time. And it's much cleaner than coal. And with carbon sequestration, we can develop, we can extract it, and we can burn it in a very clean manner. And I don't see why natural gas is so controversial. It's one of the reasons America is so clean, because we generate so much natural gas.
Right.
But even better is nuclear. If you're talking about carbon impact, is nuclear, because it has 0 carbon impact. It has the smallest impact period of any energy developed. People like to think that solar and wind, the renewables, they have a massive impact. And most solar panels and most of the raw minerals to build solar panels are coming from China. They control, and so that's a national security issue. And then solar is intermittent. It's completely unreliable at best. Both solar and wind are. So you have to have a backup. So I feel like if there's an energy of the future, it is nuclear. However, nuclear is so polarizing. And the very environmentalists who would love to see a clean future, they're the ones that have been fighting it for the last 60 years. If it wasn't for the environmental movement fighting nuclear, we might be 50 years ahead in electrification and clean energy of nuclear.
Well, I think of it that like in Europe. I've done some traveling in Europe and in France and in Ireland and those places, and they do have the small nuclear power plants to keep them going. You never see any emissions off of it. You see that.
You see steam.
Yeah. That's it.
Yep, that's
all you see.
But it's just water vapor.
So, it's absolutely clean. Nobody has any complaints. And the only time that I've ever heard anything about nuclear, anybody speaking about nuclear, is the 3 Mile Island incident, which was an isolated incident.
It's isolated, and
I'm sure technology is advanced since
technology is
so
advancing, and nobody died from that. Yeah. Some could say people got cancer 20, 30 years down the road and possibly died, but immediately nobody died from those meltdowns.
No worse than our inoculations. Sorry.
Right? even Fukushima, the meltdown, there were people who died, but they died from the flooding of those backup generators, right?
Right.
They were supposed to pump all that stuff out of. They died from that. They didn't die from any explosions or meltdowns. Now, the one that happened in Russia, Chernobyl, that's a different story. That was a full-on meltdown, but the control systems there and the controls that the government had on it was bunk, right? There just were none. And so
it was so primitive.
It was very primitive. And so, again, this is the 21st century. We can do it right. And France was trying to reverse their reliance on nuclear energy. But now that Russia has control over their natural gas and different things, they're reversing course. And we got to get nuclear back on.
Right.
Exactly.
So.
Well, and it's also the idea of affordable, because if you look at, I'm just going to use solar panels as an example. So say we wanted to put on solar panels. Well, we need a new roof. So I mean, you're going to need a new roof at some point. So we remove the solar panels, put on the new roof, reapply. There's a cost there. There's a cost for the installation. There's the inefficiency getting rid of those solar panels because they don't last forever. That's expensive.
What's the return? How do you recycle them? I mean, there's a massive impact of solar and wind on the environment.
And the people that can afford it right away. I mean, you're looking at a population that's at least a quarter retired people on fixed incomes, and then you're saying, okay, no, we want you to change your form of energy. We want you to use less energy than everybody else, and those people may use more because they're at home more than the working person who's. So in where we're talking about social equity, that equity doesn't extend to aging people.
You're right, and we just finished an article. Me and Matt Solomon with AG&C, we just finished an article, and the premise of the article, we sent it to Data Sentinel. They never printed it, but I think it was the Steamboat Gazette. I can find it for you guys. But the premise of the argument is the superior goal to net zero by 2050 is eliminate energy poverty by 2050. Because look at America. We have some energy poverty in America. I think it's something like 16% of people are still technically energy poor, which means they spend a certain percentage of their income on energy. And we need to solve that problem. But you look at the world, and we are an energy-rich country. And I believe the rest of the world deserves to have the type of energy that we have in America, because directly related to your energy consumption is your mental health, is your health in general. And I think the rest of the world deserves that. And they shouldn't be told, no, you have to live with less and try to do it with solar. And I think until we figure out energy poverty, until we solve that problem, who cares about solving the net zero thing? Because someone who's only trying to heat water so they can live, they're burning animal dung in order to heat the water so they don't get sick from the water. They don't care about the environment for the environment's sake.
Nope.
It's only a rich person's struggle to worry about the environment for the environment's sake. And the vast majority of the world is still in energy poverty. So let's solve the energy poverty. Let's let countries go through their industrial revolution and solve that poverty problem, and then let's solve the net zero environment problem. So I'll send you guys that article. It's a good article.
Yeah.
That would be good.
That would be good. So nuclear is a possibility. Plus, it would be a big boon to like Craig and all of Moffat County, probably.
Well, and all of Dolores River Canyon,
who have the
properties that have
uranium.
to mine
Absolutely.
uranium and all of that. Yeah,
and the infrastructure to create that coal uses to create energy is very similar to nuclear, and so it's not a plug and play. But the apparatus is there to use and to take advantage of, and it would be much less of an investment. But the timeline to approve nuclear, a decade plus, and we don't have a decade plus.
No.
So
I didn't know that.
We need to get that's just the average. But we need to get serious about nuclear if we're going to happen. I believe nuclear is probably not going to happen in Hayden and the north area. It's probably going to be a natural gas plant that transitions into. But I would love to see, we need to start talking about nuclear more.
Right.
And people need to start realizing that it is viable. It's the best energy out there, the cleanest energy out there.
And it doesn't take up near as much land.
It doesn't, yeah.
Well,
Because
and I think people are
for all the way
scared
around.
because they remember the movies they remember Chernobyl, and they remember the movies from the 80s and 90s.
You know where that scare came from? It was the environmentalists. They were trying to scare people away from nuclear.
Right.
Because, what's the nuclear reactor, I can't remember its name out there in California, but it was demonized,
Exactly.
And it shouldn't. Yeah, did we make mistakes? Yeah, we've made mistakes in solar and wind too. Lots of
big time.
mistakes.
Yeah.
But
The birds don't like us.
Yeah, they don't like us. But we got to move forward with the cheapest, most viable energy source that makes everybody energy rich. Because when we're energy rich, then we can start focusing on other problems.
Right. Well, and it cuts the cost of living. If you can give people a cheaper form of energy, that it's you talked about the energy poverty, but everybody could benefit from cheaper energy, especially with oil and gas. If you can power something cheaper, you can take houses or something out of it, then everything that you use that needs energy to work, everything needs energy.
It does.
And especially oil and gas too. We have over 300 products made out of petroleum, and then you say nope, you can't do that anymore.
You'd be hard pressed to find a product probably in this house that wasn't a product of oil and gas. I mean,
Take us back to the Stone Age if we got rid of all of it.
Yeah.
That's all.
So what about governments that are saying, well, we need to do this for our environment? Are they putting the environment the thing about sustainable that bothers me is I thought that the earth is designed for us, and it implies that everybody believes that we're not going through climate cycles, that we're going through climate change, and we just have to make it so that the earth, not the people, are taken care of.
And I think it assumes that also that the earth isn't adaptable.
Right, right.
Which-
Or we're not adaptable.
Or that we're not adaptable.
Yeah.
Even though climate deaths has plummeted in the last 50 years because of our ability to resist heat in the summer and cold in the winter, climate deaths are way down. So it's not a matter of whether humans are going to make it. Their idea is that the planet's not going to make it. But trust me, if the planet doesn't want us here, it'll kick us off, right? And it'll adapt well. And there's proof, obviously, of carbon dioxide being much higher in concentration in our past. And yes, we've gone through many cycles.
My neighbor across the street would argue with you. And if I could get to my phone, the amount of carbon in the atmosphere is because we're a carbon-based creature. And it's like 0.004%, and it hasn't varied that much.
400 parts per million, I think, yeah.
And it hasn't varied that much. And the planet actually needs the carbon to create life. So
no, we're carbon based.
So and the carbon credits aren't doing a darn thing for anything.
They're making people rich.
Yes.
Oh yes.
But
indeed.
But like I said, there's no true solution to anything. There's only trade-offs.
Right.
So the idea that we're going to be a carbon-free United States in terms of energy production means there's a trade-off somewhere. Someone's going to be poor. Money's going somewhere else. There's no true solution. So there's good solutions, I think, but there's there's trade-offs to nuclear too. So where do you store the used fuel? Is a big problem. So there's no perfect solution, and we just need to be able to talk about anything without being chastised. Like to say we need to drill more oil and gas to solve energy poverty, and to say you don't even care about the environment. Well, I can care about the environment and still want to produce oil and gas because our community needs it.
Right.
So,
Well, you've got to figure out the lesser of all of the evils. You really do. And you've got to take into everything into consideration. And they're not.
And the big thing that I like that you're saying is we need to talk about it, and people need to feel like when they talk, they're heard, and it makes a difference.
Yeah.
What
And
they think.
That's with every aspect of life.
Government. Yeah.
So they need to be heard. So
Absolutely.
that's what we're here for.
That's right. That's what you guys are here for.
Talking to you about.
So do you have any other things that you want to share that we didn't? And what should they do? What should we do with this information? What's the best way to get it out? Because I think you're right. I think most people are uninformed. Because I read the other day in the paper in a comment, well, what if what if Yellowstone wasn't a national monument? And I'm thinking, well, that there's a difference there, that. And another person said, well, we won't have the personnel like we do on the national monument to make sure the trails are maintained. There's just there's no money there to do all of that.
And again, the national parks, national forests, BLM, they have a lot of tools. If it wasn't a national park, it would probably be BLM owned, and they would have protections there. I mean, if it wasn't a monument, it would probably be some lesser designation, but probably it's still a lot of the same type of protections, and probably used less, and probably not trampled on by humans. Because right now that's a hot designation, Yellowstone. So less people would probably know about it. If it was national. Someone might say that the national park designation has probably diluted the value of Yellowstone. So I mean, there's an argument both ways.
Right.
But needless to say, I think there are certain places that are great for a national monument. The Dolores is not one of them. I firmly believe that, and I believe there are other tools that we can use. And if the legislature wanted to designate it as a national monument, go for it. It's harder to get through because legislation should be hard. These big decisions should be harder to get through because you should have to engage the public. And that's obviously why environmentalists want to go this route, because it takes a stroke of a pen as opposed to actually doing the hard work of engaging with your community. One thing I would like to talk about is the 29 Road interchange.
Oh, yes.
It's been one of my projects that I've really wanted to get finished. And they've been talking about this since the early 1980s.
Oh, yes.
The 1982 sales tax that was put into place, that was voted on by the people to do public infrastructure for the county. There were several projects that were listed as possible projects, and some of those were the community campuses that we're building right now in DeBeck. and Clifton, and then we've got future ambitions for other areas. But another project was the 29 road interchange. And of course, I'm sure you guys know that Exxon pulled out the year later. I think it was 1983 or 4 when Exxon pulled out, and the economy just went flat. And in fact, my dad actually had to file bankruptcy after Exxon pulled out, and learned a lot of lessons through that as well. But they didn't have the revenue they thought they were. So a lot of these projects just kind of fell through the grate, and people just kind of started forgetting about that promise to do these. So we kind of
I remember when it happened because the bridge over 29 Road Bridge did not go through at that time. It took a considerable amount of time after that before it actually was a viable thing.
Yeah, and there's the 29 Road Bridge that goes over the river on Orchard Mesa, and then there's the second bridge that goes over the business loop.
Right.
And then the final connection, kind of to finish the entire regional transportation plan, that finish that loop, is the connection to the interstate. Patterson is a heavy traffic corridor.
It's a nightmare right now.
People are going to Clifton, they're going to Horizon Drive, underneath the interstate, and finishing 29 corridor will take a lot of stress off Patterson. And so it's one of my projects that I really want to see done before I'm out of office. It's not going to happen in my first term, but we are really close. We'll most likely take it to the ballot this fall, and it's not going to be a raising taxes thing. We're going to pay for this with our own current revenue, but we're going to need permission from the voters to get a bond, to get basically a loan to pay for it, because it's going to be about an $80 million project. As of today, it could grow a little bit with inflation, but today it's projected to be about an $80 million project, and we unfortunately don't have $80 million laying around in the county. So we're going to get a note, but we're going to service it with the taxes that we already get from the people. I don't believe we should raise taxes. I believe we should live within our means. And so it's going to be without raising taxes question to go for this bond. And it's a 50-50 partnership between the city and the county. Even though it's all in the city, it's also all in the county. And this is a good regional project. It'll open up industrial and commercial development north of the interstate, east of the airport. Just a great big opportunity for our community, in my view. So we're going to put that on the ballot this fall, and hopefully, if it passes and we can get all our environmental studies done and get the Federal Highway Administration and CDOT on board, hopefully we're breaking ground in a couple of years, and hopefully by the time I'm done, we're actually driving across that thing. So that's my big goal for my second term.
That's been her big goal since 1982.
Yes, exactly. I would love to live long enough to see that and drive it one time.
Let's get it done. So that's my big goal. So that's kind of what I'm shooting for this. And we've got a good partnership with the city on this one. The city tried to put it forward last year.
Right.
The city council said no. It was a 3-4 vote. Been working really hard with our city council. And I think they're on board. Again, this is a good partnership that we have with the city to get this on board, because county can't do it by themselves and the city can't do it by themselves. So this is a good partnership.
The city needs you. The city needs it because Patterson is getting so busy, as you know, and the business loop is starting to pick up extra traffic too. So I think that would take a lot of pressure off both.
Our entire community needs it. And again, county couldn't do it, so we need the city of Grand Junction just as much as they need us. And so I'm happy that it seems like the city is all on board. We're going to have an intergovernmental agreement probably this summer that says they'll service half and we'll service half. The county is actually going to be getting the bond, but the city's going to help us service half of it. So,
well, 50-50 is fair.
Yeah, it is
fair.
Yeah.
So,
well, you've been watching Mesa County Compass. This is the truth as we see it, the facts as we know them. You decide.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Cody,
Cody.
very much for joining us.